My name is Jack, and I've been married to Sarah for almost 15 years. We have two kids, Emily, who's 12, and Jason, who's 9. Our life together was, at least in my eyes, fairly typical. We met in college, fell in love quickly, and got married right after graduation. Sarah was always the more outgoing one, beautiful, sociable, and full of life, while I was the steady, reliable guy in the background. For years, our relationship seemed solid. We had the usual ups and downs, but nothing that ever shook us to the core, or so I thought. Looking back, maybe I should have noticed the signs. Maybe I should have paid more attention when Sarah started working late more often, or when she became increasingly secretive about her phone. But I trusted her. I trusted her completely. It all started to unravel about 6 months ago. Sarah began acting differently. She was distant, irritable, and constantly on her phone. She had always been someone who enjoyed social media and texting friends, but this was different. She would smile at her screen and then quickly hide it when I came into the room. One evening, she told me she was going out with her friends from work. This wasn't unusual, but something in her demeanor seemed off. She was almost giddy, like a teenager going on a first date. I brushed it off, convincing myself I was being paranoid. Weeks went by, and her behavior only got stranger. She would come home late, smelling of alcohol and perfume that wasn't hers. She started wearing more revealing clothes and spent more time on her appearance than usual. I chalked it up to her wanting to feel good about herself. Midlife crisis, maybe. But deep down, the nagging feeling of betrayal started to grow. Then there were the phone calls. She would step out of the room whenever her phone rang, and her conversations were hushed. One night, curiosity got the better of me. After she had fallen asleep, I picked up her phone and tried to unlock it. She had changed the password. That's when it hit me. Something was terribly wrong. I felt like my world was spinning out of control, and I was desperate to find out the truth. So, I started paying closer attention, watching her every move, trying to catch any slip-up that would confirm my growing suspicions. It wasn't long before I found what I was looking for. The moment of revelation was as devastating as it was clarifying. I realized my life was about to change forever, and there was no going back. The day I discovered the full extent of Sarah's betrayal started off like any other. She left the house early, claiming she had a big presentation at work. I kissed her goodbye and watched her drive away, my mind racing with suspicions. I decided to take the day off work to dig deeper into her activities. I started by checking our shared computer for any clues. Sarah had always been careful, but everyone slips up eventually. After a few hours of scouring through her emails and social media, I hit the jackpot. An email from a hotel confirmation popped up. It was for a booking at a hotel in the city, dated for that evening. The reservation was under her name, but listed for 2 people. My heart pounded in my chest as I jotted down the details. I knew what I had to do, but the thought of what I might find terrified me. I called my friend Mike, who had been a private investigator before switching careers. He owed me a favor, and I needed his expertise now more than ever. "Mike, it's Jack. I need your help," I said, my voice barely steady. "What's going on, man?" Mike asked, concerned. "I think Sarah is cheating on me. I found a hotel reservation for tonight. Can you help me follow her, maybe get some proof?" "Jesus, Jack. I'm sorry to hear that. Of course, it'll help. Meet me at my place in an hour, and we'll set up a plan." An hour later, I was at Mike's house. We went over the details, and he handed me a small recording device and a camera. "We're going to follow her from a distance," Mike instructed. "We need to catch them in the act, get some evidence. It won't be easy, but if she's meeting someone, we'll find out." The hours dragged by as we waited outside Sarah's office. Finally, around 6 p.m., she walked out. Her face lit up as she texted someone on her phone. She got into her car and drove off, with us following discreetly behind. The hotel was a sleek, modern building in a busy part of town. Sarah parked her car and walked inside, glancing around nervously. Mike and I waited for a few minutes before following her in. The lobby was bustling with people, but I spotted Sarah heading towards the elevators. "Let's go," Mike said, leading the way. We took the next elevator up and got off on the same floor. The hallway was quiet, and I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach as we approached the room number from the email. I pressed my ear against the door, hearing muffled voices and laughter inside. My blood boiled. Mike set up the recording device by the door and gave me a nod. You ready? I nodded, my hands trembling with rage. I banged on the door, my heart pounding in my ears. The laughter stopped abruptly, and I heard hurried movements inside. Who is it? Sarah's voice called out, sounding tense. Room service, Mike lied, a smirk on his face. The door opened a crack, and I saw Sarah's face, her eyes widening in shock when she saw me. Before she could react, I shoved the door open and stormed inside. Jack, what are you doing here? She stammered, backing away. I didn't respond. My eyes were locked on the man standing by the bed, hastily pulling up his pants. He was younger, maybe in his late 20s, with a smug look on his face that made my blood boil even more. You son of a bitch! I roared, charging at him. The room erupted into chaos. I tackled him to the ground, my fists flying. He tried to fight back, but I was fueled by months of anger and betrayal. I landed a solid punch to his jaw, feeling the satisfying crunch of bone under my knuckles. Jack, stop! Please! Sarah screamed, trying to pull me off him. Mike stepped in, pulling Sarah away and restraining her. Let him have his moment, Sarah. You brought this on yourself. The man beneath me groaned, blood trickling from his nose. I stood up, glaring down at him. What's your name? I demanded. Kevin, he muttered, wincing in pain. Well, Kevin, you just made the biggest mistake of your life, I spat, kicking him in the ribs for good measure. He doubled over, gasping for breath. I turned to Sarah, who was sobbing uncontrollably. How long? I asked coldly. She didn't answer, her eyes avoiding mine. I grabbed her by the shoulders, shaking her. How long, Sarah? 2 years, she whispered, her voice barely audible. 2 years. The weight of her words hit me like a freight train. 2 years of lies, deception, and betrayal. I felt like my heart had been ripped out of my chest. Mike let go of Sarah, and I released my grip on her. I took a step back, trying to process everything. The woman I had loved and trusted for 15 years had been unfaithful for 2 of them. It was too much to bear. I'm done, I said, my voice hollow. I can't do this anymore. I turned and walked out of the room, not looking back. Mike followed me, leaving Sarah and Kevin behind. As we made our way back to the car, I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. The truth was out, and now I could start to rebuild my life. The drive home was silent. Mike offered to stay with me, but I declined. I needed to be alone, to process everything that had happened. When I got home, I poured myself a drink and sat in the living room, staring blankly at the wall. Hours passed, and I replayed the events of the day over and over in my mind. The anger and pain were overwhelming, but beneath it all, there was a glimmer of hope. I had confronted the truth, and now I could begin to heal. As I sat there, the reality of my situation began to sink in. My marriage was over, and the life I had known for 15 years was gone. But in that moment, I made a promise to myself. I would come out of this stronger, wiser, and more resilient. I would rebuild my life, not as a victim of betrayal, but as a survivor. And so, with a heavy heart but a determined spirit, I began the long journey of picking up the pieces and moving forward. The road ahead would be difficult, but I was ready to face whatever came my way. The day after I caught Sarah in the hotel, I felt like I was living in a haze. Every moment seemed surreal, every sound muffled by the weight of betrayal hanging over me. I spent most of the night on the couch, nursing a drink and staring at nothing. When morning finally came, the clarity of daylight brought with it a cold determination. I knew what I had to do. Sarah hadn't come home after the hotel. I didn't expect her to. I imagined she was staying with Kevin, nursing his bruises and trying to figure out what to do next. My mind raced with thoughts of their whispered conversations, their plans to continue their sordid affair. The anger simmered just beneath the surface, but I forced myself to stay calm. I needed to be clear-headed for what was coming. I called Mike to let him know what I was planning. I'm going to confront her today, I told him. I'm kicking her out of the house. Are you sure you want to do this alone? Mike asked, concern evident in his voice. Yes, I need to do this myself. Thanks for everything, Mike. I owe you one. Anytime, Jack. Stay strong. With that, I hung up and set about preparing for the confrontation. I knew Sarah would come home eventually, and I wanted to be ready when she did. I gathered all her belongings, packing them into suitcases and boxes. Every item I touched felt like a betrayal. a reminder of the life we had built together that was now crumbling to pieces. By late afternoon, the house was eerily silent, the emptiness only broken by the occasional creak of the floorboards. I sat in the living room, waiting. Hours passed, and my mind wandered to the memories of better times. Our wedding day, the birth of our children, the quiet moments of contentment we shared. Each memory was now tainted by the knowledge of her infidelity. Finally, around dusk, I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. My heart raced as I stood up, bracing myself for what was to come. The front door opened and Sarah walked in, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She froze when she saw me, her face a mix of fear and guilt. "Jack, please, let me explain," she started, her voice trembling. "Save it," I said coldly, cutting her off. "I don't want to hear your excuses. You betrayed me, Sarah. You betrayed our family." She took a step forward, her hands outstretched as if to reach for me. "Jack, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. It just got out of hand." "Out of hand?" I scoffed. "You've been cheating on me for 2 years, Sarah. 2 years. That's not something that just gets out of hand." Tears streamed down her face as she pleaded with me. "Please, Jack. Let's talk about this. We can work it out. I love you. I love our family." I shook my head, feeling a surge of anger. "You should have thought about that before you decided to sleep with another man. This isn't something we can just work out, Sarah. You've destroyed our marriage." She fell to her knees, sobbing. "I'm begging you, Jack. Don't throw everything away. I'll do anything to make it right. Please, just give me a chance." Her desperation was almost pitiful, but it did nothing to soften my resolve. I pointed to the suitcases and boxes by the door. "Your things are packed. Take them and go. I want you out of this house." She looked at the pile of belongings, her expression one of utter devastation. "Where am I supposed to go?" she whispered. "I don't care. Go to Kevin's. Go to a friend's. Just get out of my sight." She stood up slowly, her body shaking with sobs. "What about the kids? What are we going to tell them? The truth," I said firmly. "They deserve to know why their mother is leaving." She nodded, her shoulders slumped in defeat. "Can I at least say goodbye to them?" I considered her request, my anger warring with a sense of decency. "Fine, but make it quick." She hurried upstairs, and I heard her talking to Emily and Jason. Their voices were muffled, but I could hear the confusion and sadness in their tones. After a few minutes, she came back down, her face pale and drawn. "They're heartbroken," she said quietly. "I never wanted to hurt them." "Well, you did," I replied harshly. "Now go." She picked up her suitcases, struggling under the weight of them. As she made her way to the door, she turned to look at me one last time. "I'm so sorry, Jack. I love you." I didn't respond. I watched as she walked out of the house, the door closing behind her with a finality that echoed through the empty rooms. The silence that followed was deafening. I sank onto the couch, feeling a mix of relief and sorrow. The confrontation was over, but the reality of what had happened was just beginning to sink in. My marriage was over, and the life I had known was gone. For the next few days, the house felt like a tomb. The kids were understandably upset, and I did my best to comfort them while grappling with my own emotions. We sat down together, and I explained as gently as I could what had happened. Emily and Jason were hurt and confused, their young minds struggling to understand why their mother had left. "Mom made some bad choices," I told them, "but it doesn't mean she doesn't love you. We'll get through this together." We established a new routine, trying to find a sense of normalcy amidst the chaos. I leaned heavily on Mike and other friends for support, grateful for their presence in my life. Nights were the hardest, the quiet moments when the memories of Sarah's betrayal would come flooding back, leaving me feeling raw and exposed. One evening, a few weeks after Sarah had left, I received a call from her. I hesitated before answering, unsure if I was ready to hear her voice again. "Jack, it's me," she said softly. "What do you want, Sarah?" I asked, my tone weary. "I want to see the kids. Can we arrange something?" I sighed, knowing this was inevitable. "Fine, we'll set up a schedule. But this doesn't change anything between us. I know, she replied, her voice heavy with sadness. Thank you. We worked out a visitation schedule that allowed Sarah to see Emily and Jason regularly. I couldn't deny her the right to be with her children, despite my own feelings of anger and betrayal. As time went on, the pain began to dull, replaced by a sense of acceptance. I threw myself into my work and spent as much time as possible with the kids, determined to create a stable and loving environment for them. Slowly but surely, we started to find our footing, rebuilding our lives one day at a time. One day, while cleaning out the garage, I found an old photo album. I sat down and flipped through the pages, seeing the happy moments captured in time. Our wedding day, the birth of Emily and Jason, family vacations and holiday gatherings. Each photo was a reminder of the life we had shared, a life that was now in the past. Tears welled up in my eyes as I closed the album and set it aside. It was time to move forward, to let go of the pain and embrace the future. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was determined to find happiness again, for myself and for my children. In the months that followed, I focused on healing and rediscovering who I was outside of my marriage. I reconnected with old friends, took up new hobbies, and even started dating again. It was a slow process, but each step forward felt like a victory. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sunset, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for so long. The past was behind me, and the future stretched out before me, full of possibilities. I had survived the storm, and now it was time to build a new life, one that was stronger and more resilient than ever before. In the weeks following Sarah's departure, the initial wave of relief began to ebb, leaving behind a simmering cauldron of emotions. Anger, betrayal, and a gnawing need for justice began to consume me. The nights were the worst. As the kids slept soundly in their rooms, I found myself lying awake, replaying every moment of Sarah's deceit. My thoughts grew darker, fantasies of revenge playing out in my mind with a clarity that both frightened and exhilarated me. Mike noticed the change in me and pulled me aside one day. "Jack, I know you're hurting, but revenge, it's not going to give you the peace you're looking for." "I need her to understand what she did to me, Mike," I replied, my voice cold and hard. "She tore our family apart. She doesn't get to just walk away and be happy with that asshole." "Be careful," he warned. "Once you start down that path, it's hard to turn back." Despite his words, the desire for retribution gnawed at me. I began to scheme, plotting ways to make Sarah pay for her betrayal. I started small, sabotaging her social life. I knew her friends, her routines, and I used that knowledge to plant seeds of doubt and discord. Anonymous tips, fabricated stories, and carefully placed rumors began to erode her social circle. Sarah was a proud woman, and her social standing meant everything to her. It didn't take long for her to notice the shift. Friends stopped returning her calls, invitations to events dried up, and she found herself increasingly isolated. I watched from a distance as her world began to crumble, feeling a grim satisfaction at every piece that fell away. But it wasn't enough. The pain of her betrayal was too deep, the wound too raw. I needed to hit her where it hurt most, her career. Sarah worked as a marketing executive at a prestigious firm, a job she had fought hard to attain. Her professional life was her pride and joy, and I knew it would devastate her to lose it. I began to collect evidence of her affair with Kevin, who happened to be a senior executive at another company. With the help of Mike, I gathered incriminating emails, compromising photos, and records of their hotel rendezvous. Armed with this damning evidence, I contacted Sarah's boss, arranging an anonymous meeting. The look on her boss's face as he sifted through the evidence was one of shock and disgust. "I had no idea," he muttered, shaking his head. "This is unacceptable. She's been unfaithful to her husband and compromised her integrity," I said, my voice steady. "Someone like that has no place in a position of trust." A week later, Sarah was called into her boss's office. She returned home that evening, her face pale and drawn. "Jack, please," she began as she walked through the door. "Did you do this?" I remained silent, letting her words hang in the air. She collapsed onto the couch, tears streaming down her face. "They fired me. They said they couldn't have someone with such poor judgment representing the company. How could you do this to me?" "You did this to yourself," I replied coldly. "You destroyed our family, and now you're facing the consequences. But Jack, I'm ruined. I can't get a job in this town with this on my record, she pleaded. How am I supposed to support myself? That's not my problem, I said, turning away from her. You made your bed, Sarah. Now you have to lie in it. As she left, the satisfaction I had felt began to wane. There was an emptiness that revenge couldn't fill, a void that the destruction of Sarah's life couldn't satisfy. I had struck back, but it hadn't brought the peace I had hoped for. The weight of my actions began to press down on me, and for the first time, I questioned whether I had gone too far. The next day, Emily and Jason came home from school looking troubled. Dad, some kids were talking about Mom, Emily said quietly. They said she got fired and that you're the reason why. I knelt down to their level, trying to find the right words. Mom made some mistakes, and she's facing the consequences. But I need you to understand that I did what I thought was best for our family. Jason looked up at me, his eyes wide with confusion. Are you sure, Dad? It just seems so mean. Their words stung, and I realized that in my quest for revenge, I had forgotten the most important thing. My children's well-being. They needed stability, not more chaos. They needed a father who could rise above the hurt, not one who was consumed by it. That night, as I lay in bed, I made a decision. I couldn't undo what I had done, but I could choose a different path moving forward. I needed to focus on healing, for myself and for my children. Revenge had been a hollow victory, and it was time to find a way to truly move on. The next morning, I called Sarah. We need to talk, I said, my voice firm but calm. She agreed to meet at a nearby coffee shop. When I arrived, she was already there, looking haggard and defeated. I sat down across from her, taking a deep breath. Sarah, I want to apologize, I began. I was angry, and I let that anger drive me to do things I'm not proud of. I hurt you, and I hurt our kids. That was wrong. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of relief and wariness. Thank you, Jack. I never wanted things to end up like this. I know I hurt you, and I'm sorry. I know, I said, nodding, but we need to find a way to move forward, for the kids' sake, if nothing else. We talked for hours, hashing out a plan for co-parenting and finding a way to coexist peacefully. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of tension and anger, but we both knew it was necessary. In the weeks that followed, we worked hard to rebuild some semblance of normalcy for Emily and Jason. I focused on my job, my hobbies, and spending quality time with the kids. I started seeing a therapist who helped me work through my emotions and find healthier ways to cope with my pain. One evening, as I was tucking Emily into bed, she looked up at me with a smile. Dad, I'm proud of you, she said. Why's that, sweetie? I asked, stroking her hair. Because you're strong. Even when things are hard, you keep going. And you're teaching me that it's okay to feel sad, but it's also important to be kind. Her words brought tears to my eyes, and I hugged her tightly. In that moment, I realized that my true strength didn't come from revenge or anger, but from love and resilience. Life wasn't perfect, but it was moving in the right direction. Sarah found a new job in a different city, and while our relationship would never be the same, we managed to find a way to be civil for the sake of the kids. I focused on my own growth, learning to forgive not just Sarah, but myself as well. The journey of healing was long and difficult, but each step brought me closer to a place of peace. I learned that revenge might bring momentary satisfaction, but true healing comes from letting go and choosing to build a better future. As I sat on the porch one evening watching the sun set over the horizon, I felt a sense of hope that had been missing for so long. The scars of betrayal would always be there, but they no longer defined me. I was stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace whatever came next. Months had passed since Sarah left the house, and the initial storm of emotions had begun to settle into a quieter, more reflective phase. Our lives had fallen into a new rhythm, one defined by separate routines and shared custody. The kids had adjusted remarkably well considering the circumstances. They spent weekdays with me and weekends with Sarah, a pattern that allowed them stability and a sense of normalcy amidst the upheaval. Despite the semblance of order, the looming question of divorce hung over us like a dark cloud. It was the elephant in the room that neither of us wanted to address directly, but we both knew it was inevitable. One evening, I decided it was time to have the conversation. The kids were with Sarah for the weekend, and the house was quiet. offering the perfect opportunity to finally address the issue. I called Sarah and asked if she could come over the next day to talk. She agreed, her voice cautious and uncertain. The following afternoon she arrived, looking more composed than I had seen her in months. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the same table where we had shared countless meals and conversations over the years. Now it felt like a neutral ground, a place to negotiate the terms of our separation. "Sarah, we need to talk about the divorce," I began, my voice steady but firm. She nodded, her eyes meeting mine with a mixture of resignation and acceptance. "I know, Jack. I've been thinking about it too. We can't keep living in this limbo. It's not fair to the kids, and it's not fair to us." I took a deep breath, grateful that we were finally on the same page. "I want this to be as amicable as possible, for the kids' sake, and for our own sanity. We need to figure out the details: custody, finances, the house." Sarah sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I agree. The kids should stay with you during the week. They're settled in school and their activities here. I'll take them on weekends and during holidays. We can split the holidays evenly." "Sounds fair," I replied. "As for the house, I think it's best if I keep it. It's where the kids are comfortable, and I can manage the mortgage. You should take whatever you need to start fresh." She nodded again, a look of relief crossing her face. "Thank you, Jack. I appreciate that. I'll find a place closer to my new job, something smaller and more manageable." We discussed the financial aspects, agreeing to split our savings and investments equitably. It was a difficult conversation, but surprisingly civil. Both of us understood that dragging things out would only cause more pain, and we were committed to making the process as smooth as possible. As we finalized the details, a silence settled over us. The reality of what we were doing began to sink in. This was the end of our marriage, the end of a significant chapter in our lives. Despite everything, there was a sense of mutual respect and understanding between us. "Jack," Sarah said softly, breaking the silence, "I want you to know that I'm truly sorry for everything. I know I hurt you deeply, and I'll always regret that. I never wanted things to turn out this way." I looked at her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. For the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of empathy for her. "I know, Sarah, and I'm sorry too. We both made mistakes, but we have to move forward, for our own sake and for the kids." She reached across the table, her hand resting on mine. "Thank you, Jack. I hope one day we can both find happiness again." I squeezed her hand briefly before letting go. "I hope so too." With the major decisions made, we contacted our respective lawyers to draw up the official documents. The process took a few more weeks, but eventually, everything was finalized. The day we signed the divorce papers was bittersweet. There was a sense of closure, but also a profound sadness for what had been lost. As we stood outside the lawyer's office, Sarah turned to me. "I guess this is it," she said, her voice tinged with sadness. "Yeah," I replied, feeling the weight of the moment. "This is it." We stood there for a moment, neither of us knowing quite what to say. Finally, Sarah stepped forward and hugged me. It was a tentative embrace, but there was genuine emotion behind it. "Take care of yourself, Jack," she whispered. "You too, Sarah," I replied, hugging her back briefly. We parted ways, each heading towards a new future. As I walked to my car, I felt a strange mix of emotions. There was sadness, of course, but also a sense of relief and even hope. The chapter of my life with Sarah was over, but a new one was beginning, and for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face it. The drive home was quiet, and when I arrived, the house seemed both empty and full of possibilities. I stood in the doorway, looking around at the place that had been my home for so many years. It was time to make new memories, to build a new life for myself and my children. That evening, I sat down with Emily and Jason to explain the situation. I kept it simple, focusing on the positive aspects of our new arrangement. They were sad, of course, but also surprisingly resilient. We talked about the changes, about how we would still be a family even if things were different. "Are you okay, Dad?" Emily asked, her eyes searching mine. "I will be," I replied, smiling at her. "We all will be." In the days that followed, I focused on moving forward. I rearranged the house, making it feel like my own space. I threw myself into my work, finding solace in the routine and the sense of accomplishment it brought. I spent as much time as possible with the kids, cherishing every moment and making new memories. One evening, as we were sitting around the dinner table, Jason looked up at me. "Dad, do you think you'll ever get married again?" The question caught me off guard, and I paused, considering my answer. "I don't know, buddy. Maybe one day, but right now I'm just focused on being the best dad I can be." He nodded, seemingly satisfied with my response. Emily smiled, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "We're going to be okay, Dad. I know it." Her words filled me with a sense of hope and determination. We were going to be okay. We had each other, and that was enough. As the weeks turned into months, the pain of the past began to fade, replaced by a sense of optimism for the future. I knew there would still be challenges ahead, but I felt ready to face them. I had learned that true strength came from within, and that no matter what life threw at me, I had the resilience to overcome it. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sun set, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for so long. The past was behind me, and the future stretched out before me, full of possibilities. I had survived the storm, and now it was time to build a new life, one that was stronger and more resilient than ever before. And with that thought, I stood up, ready to face whatever came next. The finality of the divorce brought a strange mixture of relief and sorrow. With the legal proceedings behind us, Sarah and I focused on co-parenting and finding a new rhythm for our lives. It wasn't easy, but the well-being of Emily and Jason remained our top priority. We knew that despite our differences, we needed to work together to provide a stable and loving environment for our children. The first step in resolving the lingering issues was to establish clear boundaries and communication channels. We decided to use a co-parenting app to manage schedules, share updates, and communicate about the kids. This minimized direct contact and helped us keep conversations focused on Emily and Jason's needs. Sarah and I also attended a co-parenting class recommended by our therapists. The class provided valuable insights and strategies for navigating the complexities of raising children after a divorce. We learned how to communicate effectively, resolve conflicts, and support our children through the transition. One of the most challenging aspects was dealing with the emotional fallout for Emily and Jason. They were resilient, but the divorce had taken a toll on them. I scheduled regular sessions with a family therapist who specialized in helping children cope with divorce. The therapist worked with them individually and together, helping them process their emotions and develop healthy coping mechanisms. During one of the sessions, Emily expressed her fears and anxieties. "I'm scared that everything will change, and nothing will ever be the same," she said, her voice trembling. The therapist encouraged her to share more, and Emily continued. "I miss how things used to be. I miss us all being together." I listened, my heart aching for her. "Emily, I understand how you feel," I said gently. "Things have changed, but one thing will always stay the same. We love you and Jason very much. Your mom and I are here for you, no matter what." Jason, who had been quieter during the sessions, finally spoke up. "I miss having both of you around all the time, but I also like that you're not fighting anymore." His words were a stark reminder of the tension that had filled our home before the separation. I reached over and hugged him. "I know, buddy. We're all adjusting, but we'll get through this together." Outside of therapy, I made an effort to create new routines and traditions with the kids. We started a weekly movie night, where we'd watch a film together and make popcorn. We also took up hiking, exploring the trails near our home and discovering new places. These activities helped us bond and created positive memories amidst the changes. Sarah and I also agreed to attend family therapy sessions together. This helped us address any co-parenting issues and ensured we were on the same page regarding the kids' upbringing. It wasn't always easy, but the sessions provided a safe space to discuss our concerns and find solutions. As time went on, we settled into our new normal. Emily and Jason adapted to the routine of splitting time between our homes, and they began to thrive again. Sarah found a small apartment near her job, and she worked hard to make it a welcoming space for the kids. Despite the progress, there were still moments of tension and conflict. Co-parenting was a constant balancing act, and we had to navigate disagreements about school, extracurricular activities, and discipline. However, the tools and strategies we had learned in therapy helped us manage these challenges with more grace and patience. One particularly difficult moment came when Emily had a school play. Both Sarah and I wanted to attend, but the idea of sitting together in the audience was daunting. We discussed it during a therapy session, and our therapist suggested we put aside our differences for the evening and focus on supporting Emily. On the night of the play, we sat together in the audience, presenting a united front for our daughter. Emily's face lit up when she saw us both there, and she delivered a stellar performance. After the play, we took her out for ice cream to celebrate, and for a brief moment, it felt like old times. As the months turned into a year, the pain of the past began to fade, replaced by a sense of hope and resilience. Sarah and I found a way to coexist peacefully, and our interactions became more civil and respectful. We even managed to have occasional family gatherings, like birthday parties and holiday celebrations, where we put aside our differences for the sake of the kids. My own healing journey continued as well. Therapy helped me process the betrayal and anger, and I slowly began to forgive myself and Sarah. I focused on my own growth, pursuing hobbies and interests that had taken a back seat during the marriage. I also reconnected with old friends and built a supportive network around me. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Emily came into the kitchen with a thoughtful expression on her face. "Dad, do you ever think about getting married again?" The question caught me off guard and I paused, considering my response. "I don't know, Emily. Maybe someday. But right now, I'm happy focusing on you and Jason." She nodded, a small smile on her face. "I just want you to be happy." Her words touched me deeply, and I realized how much we had all grown through this experience. "I am happy, Emily. I have you and Jason, and that means everything to me." As the days turned into months, the resolution of our problems became more apparent. We had faced the storm and come out stronger on the other side. Our family was different, but we had found a new way to be together, one that was healthier and more supportive. The journey was far from over, but each step forward brought us closer to a place of peace and stability. We had learned that healing was a process, not a destination, and that true strength came from facing our challenges head-on and finding a way to overcome them. As I stood on the porch one evening, watching the sunset, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. The past had shaped us, but it did not define us. We had the power to create our own future, one filled with hope, love, and resilience. As the seasons changed, so did our lives. The pain of the past began to fade, leaving behind lessons that shaped us into stronger, more resilient individuals. The divorce, while a difficult and painful process, had ultimately been a catalyst for growth and transformation. One crisp autumn morning, I woke up with a sense of peace that had eluded me for so long. The house was quiet, the early morning light casting a warm glow through the windows. I made my way to the kitchen, savoring the simplicity of a quiet moment before the kids woke up. This tranquility, once marred by turmoil, now felt like a blessing. Emily and Jason had adapted well to our new life. Their resilience and ability to find joy, even in the midst of upheaval, never ceased to amaze me. We had established new routines, traditions, and a sense of normalcy that brought us closer together as a family. The wounds of the past were healing, and a new chapter was beginning to unfold. That morning, as I sipped my coffee and looked out the window at the golden leaves falling from the trees, I reflected on the journey we had been through. The betrayal, the anger, the pain, it had all been a crucible that forged us into who we were now. And who we were now was stronger, more compassionate, and more appreciative of the simple joys in life. One of those simple joys was our weekly hiking trips. It had become a cherished tradition, a time for us to connect with nature and with each other. We had explored countless trails, each one offering new adventures and discoveries. It was on one such hike that I had a realization that would shape the course of my future. We were at the top of a hill, the view stretching out for miles in every direction. The kids were laughing, their faces flushed with the exertion of the climb and the excitement of reaching the summit. I stood there, watching them, and felt a deep sense of contentment. This was what life was about. These moments of pure, unadulterated joy. As we made our way back down the trail, I thought about what lay ahead. The future was a blank canvas, and I had the power to shape it. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of hope and possibility. The past was behind us, and it was time to look forward. In the weeks that followed, I began to make plans for the future. I had always been passionate about photography, a hobby that had taken a back seat during the chaos of the past few years. I decided to pursue it more seriously, taking a class at the local community center and even setting up a small studio in the house. The creative process was therapeutic, a way to express myself and capture the beauty of the world around me. Emily and Jason were my biggest supporters, often accompanying me on photo shoots and offering their own unique perspectives. It became a family project, a way for us to bond and create together. Their enthusiasm and creativity inspired me, and I found myself growing not just as a photographer, but as a father and a person. One evening, after a particularly successful photo session, we sat around the dinner table, reviewing the pictures we had taken. Emily looked up at me, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Dad, you should have a gallery show. Your pictures are amazing." Jason nodded in agreement. "Yeah, Dad, people would love to see your work." Their encouragement filled me with pride and motivation. "You know what? That's a great idea. Let's make it happen." We spent the next few months preparing for the show. I selected my best photographs, framed them, and organized them into themes. Emily and Jason helped with the planning, from choosing the venue to designing the invitations. It was a labor of love, a project that brought us even closer together. The night of the gallery opening was a magical one. Friends, family, and even some local art enthusiasts gathered to view the photographs. The room buzzed with excitement and admiration, and I felt a deep sense of accomplishment. This was a new beginning, a testament to the resilience and creativity that had emerged from the ashes of our past. Sarah attended the opening as well, and though our relationship was still complicated, we managed to find a sense of mutual respect and understanding. She congratulated me on the success of the show, and we shared a moment of quiet reflection on how far we had come. As the evening wound down, I stood in the gallery, surrounded by the photographs that represented my journey. Each image told a story, a piece of the larger narrative that was my life. And in that moment, I realized that I was no longer defined by the pain and betrayal of the past. I was defined by my resilience, my ability to heal, and my commitment to building a better future for myself and my children. The gallery show was just the beginning. It opened up new opportunities, including a few commissions, and even a teaching gig at the community center. I embraced these opportunities with enthusiasm, eager to explore new paths and continue growing. Through it all, Emily and Jason remained my anchor. Their love and support were unwavering, and they reminded me every day of what truly mattered. We continued to create new memories, celebrate milestones, and face challenges together. Our family, though different from what it once was strong and united. One weekend, we decided to take a trip to the coast. It was a spontaneous decision, driven by a desire to escape the routine and experience something new. We spent the days exploring the beach, building sandcastles, and collecting seashells. At night, we sat around a bonfire, roasting marshmallows and telling stories. As I watched the kids play in the surf, their laughter carried on the breeze. I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Life had taken us on a tumultuous journey, but it had also given us the strength to overcome and the opportunity to rebuild. The future was bright, and I was ready to embrace it with open arms. Back at home, I continued to focus on my photography and the new life we were building. I reconnected with old friends and made new ones, creating a support network that enriched my life in ways I hadn't anticipated. I also began to open myself up to the possibility of new relationships, though I approached them with caution and a newfound understanding of my own needs and boundaries. One evening, I received a message from a woman named Claire, who had attended my gallery show. She was a local artist, and she expressed admiration for my work and suggested we collaborate on a project. Intrigued, I agreed to meet her for coffee to discuss the details. Our meeting turned into a long conversation about art, life, and the journeys that had brought us to this point. Claire was warm, intelligent, and creative, with a passion for her work that matched my own. There was an immediate connection, and we decided to move forward with the collaboration. Over the next few months, Claire and I worked closely together, combining our talents to create something unique and beautiful. Our professional partnership soon blossomed into a personal one, and I found myself feeling a sense of excitement and possibility that I hadn't felt in years. Claire met Emily and Jason, and they took to her immediately. Her presence in our lives was a breath of fresh air, and she brought a sense of joy and stability that complemented our new family dynamic. We took things slow, mindful of the kids and the delicate balance we had worked so hard to achieve. As the year drew to a close, I reflected on the journey we had taken. The pain and betrayal of the past were no longer the defining features of my life. Instead, they were part of a larger tapestry of growth, resilience, and renewal. I had learned to forgive, to let go, and to embrace the future with hope and determination. On New Year's Eve, Claire, Emily, Jason, and I gathered at our home, celebrating with friends and family. As the clock struck midnight, we toasted to new beginnings and the promise of the year ahead. I looked around at the faces of the people I loved, feeling a deep sense of gratitude and contentment. The journey wasn't over, but I was ready for whatever came next. We had faced the storm and come out stronger on the other side. The future was bright, and together, we would continue to build a life filled with love, joy, and endless possibilities. As the fireworks lit up the night sky, I held Claire's hand and whispered a silent thank you for the lessons learned, the strength found, and the new life that lay ahead. The past was behind us, and the future was ours to create. And so, with hope in my heart and a renewed sense of purpose, I stepped into the new year, ready to embrace the endless possibilities that awaited.